Hello, welcome back to Movie Husbands. Today we'll be reviewing Inside Out 2. In Inside Out 2, joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust have been running a successful operations by all accounts. However, when anxiety shows up, they aren't sure how to feel. The Pixar film is directed by Kelsey Mann and stars Amy Poehler, Tony Hale, Ayo Edebiri, Maya Hawke, and many, many more. So Matt, what do you think of Inside Out 2?
Pixar, as we all know, has a very storied history of crafting some of the most popular and widely seen animated films of the past 3 decades, starting with Toy Story in 1995. Their films, in my opinion, have this unmatched ability to weave stories and concepts, not just for younger audiences, but for older ones as well. In some magical way, I think they speak to the audience regardless of age and can make both kids laugh and adults cry. For example, Toy Story taught us about jealousy and becoming friends with somebody completely different from yourself. Wall-E taught us about taking care of the planet as well as hyper-commercialism and monopolies. And the first Inside Out taught us that no matter how much we may push sadness away, it's okay to feel sad. Inside Out itself is probably one of my favorite Pixar films. I would say top 3. And I think one of yours as well, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. I find Inside Out to be an extremely witty film about the inner workings of the brain. And I love how it really goes down the rabbit hole with those concepts, generating islands in the mind of certain things that are important to you. But within all that, the film has this ability to also make you very emotional. Even today, I still feel welled up of emotion when Riley is overcome with sadness by the end of the movie, unloads on her parents about everything that she's feeling, and it really, in effect, brings them together. So what she needed was, instead of repressing how sad she was, is to just feel sad and express that sadness. And so I just found Inside Out to be this beautifully crafted film that is so extremely relatable to the human experience. Here we are with Inside Out 2. And while I don't think it really reinvented what the first film did, I do think it really succeeded in repeating the same themes as the first, but with the more complex emotions of a budding teenager. In the film, we're introduced to 4 new emotions that include anxiety, embarrassment, envy, and why can't I say the last? Ennui?
Ennui?
Yeah. Oh, I said it right. Okay,
Yeah.
Cool. Enjoys attempts, once again, to repress these emotions. Granted, though, she doesn't really know they exist until they're piled on her. She gives way to anxiety, who begins to slowly chip away at Riley's sense of self.
Inside Out 2, I think, in a lot of ways, is an extension of the first film. That's in ways both good and bad. This film, you could imagine a whole elaborate series of these where each new section of life is greeted to a new emotion. Like, we get this running joke about nostalgia throughout the film. That's like a running joke for a future sequel. You could see nostalgia being invited into this. Maybe later in life, you would see things like regret or like emotional stability or maybe financial worry, like things that become more specific and are a component of a later development in your life. I found the film virtually as clever as the first film and certainly as funny, but it wasn't quite as emotionally satisfied. Like, you did a really good job of nailing what was so great about the first Inside Out film. They did replicate a lot of that, but I did find myself feeling a little bit more like I was going through the motions with this one. Some of that has to do with like a very, very high bar that the first film raised. The first film had that extraordinarily clever concept matched with the revelations of these emotions that shouldn't be viewed as separate entities but should be integrated. Matching that concept with the cleverness of the idea and the heart of the story was really an emotional experience. And like you were talking about, certainly one of my favorite Pixar films. This film does all of that again, I think, very successfully and with a lot of charm, but with slightly diminishing returns, in my opinion.
I understand that. I don't think I loved it as much as the first Inside Out. The way I looked at this film, and this is going to be a very weird comparison, but I feel like Riley's starting to grow with us like the Before series did.
You would make the weirdest comparisons.
Okay, stick with me. The first movie, I think, is filled with very simple emotions of infatuation and love. And then the second movie, you realize it's not as simple as that. And there's so many more complex ideas going on here with trying to fall in love with somebody that lives so far away from you.
Well, of course, that's what I said about this like being a series. You can imagine this going into your 60s.
Exactly. And so the way I saw the film was really just a building of these complex emotions as we enter teenagehood. And I found that to be extremely relatable, especially the way anxiety just builds and takes over the sense of self throughout the film. I think it held up really well. I think for a sequel, this was one of the best sequels I think I could possibly think of in my mind. I felt like this uncanny ability that these films have to weave these emotions and our internal thought processes into each other is just so well done. I don't know. It's uncomparable to a lot of things.
I understand what you're saying. I'm becoming like a little bit concerned that Pixar has sequel-itis. I look at this film and I say, was this film really necessary? And maybe that's like our dividing point here.
Oh.
Like after a line of really extraordinary sequels with the Toy Story series, they're almost similar to James Cameron in the way that James Cameron always makes a really good sequel. Avatar 2 is fine, but anyway, Terminator 2 and Aliens or whatever, he was known as like the king of the sequel for a long time. And honestly, Pixar was too, in the way that their sequels often deepened and built upon the narratives and the emotions of the prior films. That's a very, very rare quality in the film industry. But lately, I haven't felt that as much, and this kind of started with Toy Story 4, and I know that we also disagree on that movie. I just don't know if this was a creative idea or if this was something that was made for money. Like, is it funny? Yes. Is it pretty good? Totally. Does it ruin the prior film? Absolutely not. Was it necessary? Was it born of a creative spark where they needed to tell this story? I don't know. It doesn't really feel that way to me, to be honest. And that's more of a feeling than something I can point to exactly in the film, because frankly, it's just too similar to the prior film. Toy Story 2 is such a different movie than Toy Story 1. Toy Story 3 is quite a different movie than Toy Story 2 and 1. I don't think there's enough that separates this film from the first in order to like justify its existence. I basically see the first film again, but bringing in these complex emotions. And again, that doesn't mean that it's not fun to watch and it's not really funny and it's not insightful in some ways. I'm not sure that it completely justifies why it's here.
I completely disagree.
I had a suspicion you would.
I understand it's doing a lot of the same things, but I don't think that means it's a cash grab. I think it's doing it with genuine heart.
Disney is a nonprofit company.
No,
I have to look that up.
I'm not saying that, but the creatives involved are just beyond the people that run Disney.
Yeah,
we have to understand that. I think what the film succeeds in doing here is that it's really building upon the complexities of human life. That's something that might not seem like revolutionary coming from the first film, because you feel like it was dealing with these emotions and it's doing the same thing here. But I feel like there's a level of complexity that's growing because she's growing, following her experience into something that is very relatable through teenagehood, becoming very emotionally all over the place. You're angry at certain times, you're sad at certain times, you're shunning your parents away at certain times because you don't want their help, because you're embarrassed for their help, getting a lot of friends, and then your friends are going off to a new high school. There's so much going on here, and how overwhelming all that is in just one sentence alone.
Can I interject for 2 seconds with a joke that I really liked in the movie? That when the puberty alarm goes off, whenever they touch the council, everything is heightened for no reason. And like she feels extraordinarily sad, then really angry, then really disgusted. I thought that was really funny how like the idea of puberty just amplifies and augments all of these things that we already have in a way that's like really unregulatory compared to what came before.
The purpose of the first movie was regressing a certain specific emotion, and that is the sadness of removing and not knowing how to deal with that. But I think what this film did differently is it's showing the problem with having certain emotions or certain feelings and letting them consume you. She feels very envious. So envy comes in and helps her decide that maybe she should go open this book, the notebook of the coach that's sitting in the office and says the thoughts about how she is as a hockey player. Yeah. Then, of course, anxiety really takes over and is the main focal point of the film, played by Maya Hawke. Anxiety's overwhelming nature to consume and destruct a person plays out in this film. So I think the focus is anxiety, but we do see little snippets of how the other emotions can really overtake and cause harm, just like joy. And I think that's something that we learned in this film as well. The overconsumption and the focus on joy, feeling like you have to be happy all the time, which just doesn't exist.
I have a thing on that.
That's a whole big point of the film as well. So I do feel that there are similar things that they're doing here, but I feel like they're just expanding them and making so much more complex. And I found that to be really moving.
If joy did not exist, Riley would be perfectly fine, but she is like the toxic positivity person that's just like joy, 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 yay, 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 and then anyway, she screws up everything in both movies. So I'm just putting that out there.
She screws it up and then is the one everybody relies on to fix it.
Yeah, but what was funny in this movie is everybody kept saying like anxiety would know what to do. Yeah, I really like that. I understand what you're saying, that I think the premise is different, but I think that the lesson is the same. So essentially in the first film, I learned that joy and sadness can be integrated, and that makes Riley a better person. And that's basically what I learned in this film with anxiety. I will say that there's a deepening with anxiety that I really liked. I really liked the themes in general in both of these films. Bad emotions are actually good. This is a retread from the first film in some way, but it's an important lesson to, I think, both kids and adults alike, that it bears repeating. You were saying this before, but we live in a culture that implicitly prioritizes joy all the time, as if all other emotions are just burdens until we get to more joy. I almost just quoted Don Draper. The first film with sadness and the second film with anxiety really show how core these emotions are to our being. Anxiety in this film, when they're building the belief system, it does a fantastic job of anticipating the future, of playing out various scenarios in order to like accurately think of the best solution. That's a benefit of a negative emotion. It's only when anxiety starts dominating the mind that it really becomes an issue. But imbalance with all of the other emotions, a sprinkling of anxiety is actually a benefit. Anyway, I like that the film double downs on that lesson because I think that's a really important lesson, something that's like baked in the stories that we've been telling each other for generations and children's books and etc. is that you're always seeking happiness. That's when you find happiness as if it's like this plane that you can just get and stay there. That's when you're really there, right? That's when you're really in the golden age of your life, but that's not true. It's all about these things in harmony with one another, and they all have a benefit. So I really like that about the film, and I really like that about the first film too.
Going from there, because I want to pinpoint some of the things that you talked about, but I really want to talk about the comedic timing of this film and the comedic elements.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned some great ones in your
favorite
little
part.
spiel. And one of those things is how anxiety is creating all these visions for how things could go in her head. The regular group is Outcast, the original group, and they find their way into Imagination Land, but it has been retooled into this factory, just workers coming down with all these ideas of what can go wrong, what can go wrong, what can go wrong.
Yeah.
I thought that was a great visual, how that actually works in our brains.
Yeah, and she's sitting there spiraling in bed, thinking
Yeah.
about all these things. Yeah.
The cutbacks are completely hilarious, and that happens. So that was another thing I was going to mention is the cutbacks, the way that they cut back to what she's doing in her mind, and then versus what's actually coming across in real life.
We do get more Riley in this movie,
Yeah.
which I think is a good idea.
There's also some great callbacks to the first movie, which I liked. They pick up a memory, and it's a memory from the first film, which I thought was really funny.
They're searching for songs, and they hear the Peppermint Gum song
Yeah.
again. Yeah. Where it succeeds, really, I think, is in the comedy and like some of the satire of psychology that you were talking about. This film is as clever and as funny as the first film, or at least really close to it. Something we haven't mentioned yet is we get introduced to the vault where Riley's secrets are hidden away. We get to meet this new character, Pouchy, who's hilarious, and he becomes instrumental to the plot later, but he's like this great satire of
Blue's Clues
era things that make no sense. Is a tomato gonna help? Or is some dynamite gonna help?
More play on what's her face, that girl that walks around backpacking map.
Oh, Dora
the Explorer. Yeah, it's really a call to that.
We also meet like a Final Fantasy character-esque video game character.
They all found hot.
Yeah, who has the dumbest finishing move of all time. Those are some examples of some really good comedy here, and I found myself laughing a lot, but it was the good kind of laugh. It was the laugh of recognition. My mind is working to connect that to something in my own life that I recognize, and I'm laughing at the recognition of that thing.
I heard you laughing a lot in this.
Yeah, so that was like the recognition of truth with a lot of the clever ideas here, I think is really great.
We also get some great revisiting of the parents' brains as well. In the mom's brain, anxiety had disappeared for a while, but then anxiety like comes back through the curtain because now she's anxious about the direction her daughter's going and going through teenagehood.
Anxiety in the dad's brain is just like shoot away quickly, and it's like, nah, it's fine.
One of the big aspects of this film that I think we haven't really talked about is that at the beginning of the movie, we see Joy. At the end of the day, they're going through all the memories, and they're looking at like embarrassing ones or things they don't want to remember about themselves that showed them in a bad light. Being tossed by Joy into this outer reach of the mind, they just go away in this trash heap. One of the big things about this film that I think is different from the first film is that it's not just the repression of emotion, but it's the repression of memory. Things that don't really reflect well on us that we tend to put away and forget about. An F on a test, or how you called somebody the wrong name and how embarrassing that was. But it's really about how these memories and these experiences as human beings actually shape us into good people and more complex people. It's one of the things that I thought this film dealt with that the first film didn't. So you ready to go to grades?
Yes, I'm going to give Inside Out to a B-, which I think is fair. I don't know, you're like staring at me right now. I think that our disagreement has to do with how much we liked it. You seem to really like it.
I really liked it, yeah.
I just liked it. I thought it was a good time at the movies. Without credits, it's like 88 minutes long. It breezes by. It's a lot of fun. I think the story is fine enough. Essentially, you have like a replication of the first film. You have these various emotions like failing to work together and then all fighting at the helm. A new emotion is introduced, like sadness in the first film, and then they find a way to work together. I think the fact that it was so similar, even if it has like a deepening of it in some ways and it looks at it from a different angle, it just felt so much like a retread of the first film that it's impossible for them to replicate that emotional resonance that I had the first time. And again, there's a lot to like here, especially on the comedy side, especially with the cleverness. Like they do find new ways to mine our minds of like funny little things going on in it. I would recommend seeing it. I think it's fun. I'm not sure I'm going to think about it a lot.
Wow. Well, I personally think that this possibly could be a movie that grows with you after you watch it more times. I think it'll be like Before Sunset. It'll grow in your mind. It'll become a better film as time passes.
I grew with Before Sunset, but that movie has a lot more going on. I'm already past this stage. I did the anxious teenager thing where I was interpreting people's eyebrows and like how they looked and they're hiding things. Like I did all that, you know? I don't think
and we did all the childhood stuff from Inside Out as well.
I don't know. I just don't think there's much to reflect on. But.
Okay. All right. Well, I definitely disagree. I had a lot to reflect on this movie. I thought it was almost like a healing of your inner child a little bit, same as the first one was. We didn't have any movies like this growing up, but I think so many characteristics about these films are really about teaching younger kids and young adults certain qualities or aspects that make you a very complex human being. But anyways, I give it an A. I really, really liked it. And I feel like you're really lowballing this movie because there is so much more than just a retread of the first movie. The movie is really delving into the idea of belief systems that are being built through teenagehood, because at first you're experiencing just all these emotions, happiness, sad, and anger. But now you're taking these emotions and all of them together and you're creating actual beliefs for yourself. And you could see for a flicker in this movie, if she kept on the same path as some of these beliefs as they were being grown through anxiety, this could have turned her into not a great person. These things can grow into something bigger later on if they're not really dealt with.
That's it for a review of Inside Out 2, which is now in theaters. So go check it out in theaters. I think even though we're a little bit apart, we both recommend it. So definitely check it out. Let us know what you think in the comments, and we will see you next time.